Though not a real family, the Charles Manson family was one of the more psychologically interesting cases of a group of people teaming up for serial murder. No one personified the dark side of the 60s clash of values more than the sex and drug-crazed demon hippie, Charles Manson. He added a new element to the overall violence of the period and opened the floodgates to a new wave of serial killing. Manson's perversion of life included an apocalyptic race war he named Helter Skelter after the Beatles' hit song by the same name. The race war never materialized. Instead, the demented Manson and his equally demented family launched America onto the path of a serial killing spree that would last for decades.
Well, Manson certainly got people interested in crime and homicide. They got interested because of the semi-celebrities that were killed. I'd say semi because they weren't that well known yet. I think they were on their way to becoming well known. And the way the media treated some of the crime scenes that the sheriff's department allowed them to. The media basically walked all over the law enforcement community during part of that case, and they got a lot of information they shouldn't have had. And a lot of that information came out in the press and in television. Consequently, it just generated more interest on the part of the public. And it's almost as if that was the start of an era of serial killers as well as mass killing done all at one time.
Manson was born in 1934 to a 16-year-old unwed mother, Kathleen Maddox. Named Charles Miles Maddox, he took the name of Manson from a man his mother later married. From the start, Manson's life was a litany of brutality. At age 5, his mother, an alcoholic, sold him to a woman for a pitcher of beer. As a young boy, Manson turned to crime and was in and out of juvenile centers, even escaping from Boys Town in Nebraska. By 1967, when he began to form his infamous family, he had spent half of his 32 years in jails and prisons. 1967 was the summer of love. And Manson set himself up as a self-styled guru in San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury, America's center of the counterculture. He attracted followers, mostly women. Together, his family traveled the western U.S. in a hippie-styled VW van, ending up in Los Angeles. Manson controlled his family, loving the sense of power over other human beings. On August 8, 1969, that sense of power turned deadly with the brutal assault at actress Sharon Tate's home. Manson sent members of his family to kill everyone at the house. The victims, Tate, 8.5 months pregnant, her friend Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, heiress to the Folger coffee fortune, and her lover, were butchered, slashed and stabbed as many as 51 times. When the Manson family members left, they wrote the word "pig" on the front door in Sharon Tate's blood. 2 nights later, the family struck again. This time, led by Manson, they entered the home of Leno LaBianca and his wife, Rosemary. While Manson watched, the family members used knives to hack their helpless victims to death. The word war was carved into Leno LaBianca's stomach, while the couple's blood was used to write the words rise, death to pigs, and helter skelter on the walls of their home. When the Manson family was finally brought to justice, their horrific acts defied understanding. Yet, at the same time, they fascinated the public. And the cause of the killings was hotly debated. Some felt it was a political statement. Others do not agree.
I'm not sure the degree to which I buy into how much Charles Manson really believed in helter-skelter and the creation of a race war. For example, if you're going to create a race war by killing white people, don't you write things on the walls like, die white motherfuckers or something like that? And they did not do that. These were people who death became part of their day-to-day vibe. Charles Manson liked creating an atmosphere of fear and of that kind of consciousness that fear brings. And certainly the killing of people and killing of the people that they disagreed with, the pigs, so to speak, became common talk around their family and around their group until it became actualized.
After numerous attempts at parole, Charles Manson died in prison on November 19, 2017, from cardiac arrest, respiratory failure, and colon cancer. Team up to serial kill came to light with a couple known as the Lonely Hearts Killers, the first of a sequence of buddy male-female serial killers.
You find this kind of circle the wagons mentality where you have a very influential offender and a very impressionable offender, the latter taken under the tutelage of the former, for example. Often somebody who's very needy, who wants or needs a father figure. And you find these two individuals who view the world from the perspective of their own little bubble, and they seem to have convinced each other that they need to kill, that they want people to suffer, and they feed each other's twisted perception and rationalize the murders.
They, Martha and Raymond, also known as the Lonely Hearts Killers, because they met their unsuspecting victims through Lonely Hearts ads. From 1947 to 1951, the year of their executions, they were a media sensation. Martha Beck died at the age of 31, executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing prison, the same day as her live-in lover, Raymond Fernandez, 36, who was executed a few hours before her. She said, "What does it matter who is to blame?" She continued, "My story is a love story, but only those tortured with love can understand what I mean. I was pictured as a fat, unfeeling woman. I am not unfeeling, stupid, or moronic. In the history of the world, how many crimes have been attributed to love?" Born on May 6, 1920, in Milton, Florida, Martha had a tragic, difficult childhood. She had an overbearing, domineering mother who ridiculed her because of her looks and weight. She was also mercilessly teased and tormented by classmates. Reportedly, she was also sexually molested by her brother at the age of 10. Always plagued by being overweight, after Martha finished school, she studied nursing, moved to California, where she worked in an army hospital as a nurse. She engaged in sexually promiscuous behavior and eventually became pregnant. She tried to convince the father to marry her, but he refused. Single and pregnant, she returned to Florida. Shortly after her daughter was born, she became pregnant again by a Pensacola bus driver named Alfred Beck. They married quickly and divorced 6 months thereafter, and she gave birth to a son. Unemployed and the single mother of 2 young children, Beck escaped into a fantasy world, buying romance magazines and novels and watching romantic movies. In 1946, she found employment at the Pensacola Hospital for Children. She placed a Lonely Hearts ad in 1947, which Raymond Fernandez answered. Raymond Martinez Fernandez was born on December 17, 1914 in Hawaii to Spanish parents. Shortly thereafter, they moved to Connecticut. As an adult, he moved to Spain, married, and had 4 children, all of whom he abandoned later on in life. After serving in British intelligence during World War II, Fernandez began a life of petty crime. He once claimed black magic gave him irresistible power and charm over women. Eventually, Fernandez moved to New York City and began answering personal ads by lonely women. He would wine and dine them, then steal their money and possessions. Most were too embarrassed to report the crimes. In one case, he traveled with a woman to Spain, where he visited his wife and introduced the 2 women. His female traveling companion then died under suspicious circumstances. He then took possession of her property with a forged will. It was probably his first murder. In 1947, he answered a personal ad placed by Martha Beck. Fernandez visited Beck and stayed for a short time. A murderous bond was forming. Martha returned to Florida, but not for long. Shortly, Martha packed up and arrived on Fernandez's doorstep in New York City. He enjoyed the way she catered to his every whim, and when he confessed his criminal enterprises, Martha quickly became a willing participant and abandoned her children in Florida. She posed as Fernandez's sister, giving him an air of respectability. They were constantly writing Lonely Hearts letters with potential candidates they could bilk. Their Lonely Hearts victims often stayed with them or with her. She was extremely jealous and would go to great lengths to make sure he and his intended never consummated their relationship. When he did have sex with a woman, both were subjected to Martha's violent temper. In 1949, the pair committed the 3 murders of which they would later be convicted. Janet Fay, 66, became engaged to Fernandez and went to stay at his Long Island apartment. When Beck saw her and Fernandez in bed together, she smashed Fay's head in with a hammer in a murderous rage. And then Fernandez strangled her. Fay's family became suspicious, and Martha and Raymond moved on to new victims. They traveled to Byron Center Road in Wyoming Township, Michigan, a suburb of Grand Rapids, to meet Delphine Downing, a young widow with a 2-year-old daughter. While they stayed with Downing, Downing became agitated, and Fernandez gave her sleeping pills. Enraged by Downing's crying daughter, Beck strangled her, though not killing her. Fernandez thought Downing would become suspicious if she saw her bruised daughter, so he shot the unconscious woman. Raymond and Martha stayed for several days in Downing's house. Again, enraged by the daughter's crying, Martha drowned her in a basin of water. They buried the bodies in the basement. But suspicious neighbors reported their disappearance, and police arrived at their door on February 28, 1949. Their story was a media sensation, and eventually Michigan, which had no death penalty, waived their murder convictions, and they were sent to New York, where they could be tried and executed. Two of the worst buddy